قلبي على جمعة الخير هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا ويا هلا يا هلا ويا هلا ويا.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another cold Wednesday right here in South Africa. But I guess what can we expect? It is the middle of winter and I do hope that you're dressed up nice and warm in case you're going out. On the show today, please do stay with us till 10 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. We'll be looking at the issue around importance in Islamic guidance in business. That will be with Maulana Muhammad Ashraf Patel. The Ahmed Kathrada Foundation will be coming in to talk to us about the fight back against state capture. Our guest is Nishan Bolton. But right up front, the first interview for the morning is about your future financial planning, why it is important, and if you don't do anything about it now, you're going to be stuck in a rut, because we know what the state of the state pensions looks like at the moment. So that's really a very frightening picture. Let's look at what it is that you can do now, whether you're 50 years old or 15 years old. It's never too early or never too late as far as future financial planning is concerned. In studio with me, I have Eugene Marie. He's from an organization called Wealthport. He is the group CEO and director, and is here to give us some very sound financial advice. Morning, welcome to the program.
Morning, Julie. Thank you for the opportunity.
Would I be correct in saying it's never too early or never too late as far as future financial planning is concerned?
Absolutely. I think the problem with in most cases is people try and put this off. And the reason for that is that most people's financial situation is not normally good. Let's face it, most people consume too much, and really the few wealthy, and if you look at the percentages of people that come to retire, only 5% of the people retire successfully. And if you look at that, 41% of the population in South Africa are going to retire with less than R1 million. And that's incredibly concerning. So how did that happen? And part of it is that the financial services industry as a whole, if you think about it, has been a barrier for most people. And I think it's that lack of engagement from young age right through to in 50. You see clients in their 50s coming in and saying, well, I'm terribly embarrassed that I might not have a lot of save. I might have this big lifestyle or good lifestyle, but I have never saved any money. And the reason for that is they keep on putting it off. They say, well, I know the situations are good and it's actually too late. It's not too late. Because if you really think about it, most of us, up until 30, we're still learning our careers. And from 30 to maybe 50, we worked hard, 20 years. But most of us are going to have to work till we're 70. And 65 is an arbitrary age these days. 70 people are healthy still. You can work to 70. So 50 is only halfway. But if you had started younger with good habits, it's going to make it so much easier. So I think one of the things to think about is, why do people not do it? Why do people not engage in financial services? And I think there's a couple of reasons. One is it's been intimidating. Two is, I think that financial services, the way they've been sold in the past, let's have a look at, for example, the medical industry. If I ask a person what causes a cold, what causes cancer, they'd probably be able to rattle off a couple of things, and they wouldn't be far wrong. And if you consider that it takes 7 years to become a doctor, most people fancy themselves as a kind of a doctor. If we have a headache, we walk into a pharmaceutical company, or we go into a pharmacy and we buy headache pills. But we could have a brain tumor for that matters. The fact is we self-diagnose ourselves. But when it comes to savings, you ask the same 20-year-old, what should you be doing for your future? And they don't know. So that's a massive failure on the financial services industry.
Either it's the youngster that doesn't know or doesn't care, because they have this philosophy, live for today and tomorrow will take care of itself. But I'm going to get back to that in a minute or two. Let's understand who's Wealthport. How long are you in the industry, and why do you believe you are the right person to come to for financial advice and future planning?
All right, so Wealthport is a platform. It's an investment platform, and the one thing about this particular platform is it allows the full range of investment options through one account. So you can have one account and you can access, whether it be unit trusts, ETF, structured notes, all the types of products that you'll be available in the retail space. Most of the platforms today, and I think traditionally, were mainly unit trust fund platforms. So the market has changed, the products have evolved, and certainly we're busy working on Sharia products. Funny that we were talking about it earlier.
Of course.
We've been working on some of the Sharia products, some very interesting products coming up. And the idea really is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to reduce costs for clients, because one of the things that we really pioneered was one is to have more inclusion of product. So in other words, most of the platforms are owned by product providers. This was the first independent multi-asset platform in South Africa where through one account we contract with advisors who will use our platform. We don't do any direct work. So the advisor would come in, they'd have one account for a client, and you would get all your reporting and all your access to the products through one suite. The thing that we sort of thought about at the time is that when investment comes along and when people come to invest, it's not just picking the investments or even choosing to invest, but it's managing things like your fees, managing things like risk. There are only two things you can manage in your investment portfolio for certain, and that is fees and risk. So you can manage what type of risk you want to take, and you can manage your fees. Performance, unfortunately, is out of our control. We do the best we possibly can, and we think this platform and the type of advisors we use, we've built some really benchmark technology that allows the client to interact through a dashboard, which gives them some sort of financial guidance. So when they're working with the advisor, it's a collaborative effort. They can actually see what the advisor is trying to do, and it's much more transparent. They become aware of the process. So they can scenario plan, they can use sliders, they can use a whole lot of really nifty tools that helps them get a feel of what they should be doing. And this helps them not being misled by some advisors who may just be product salesmen for that matter.
What about someone who'd argue that why should I come to Wealthport? Who is Eugene Marie? Why should I trust him? I can rather interact as far as my future plan is concerned with my banker.
Sure. So Wealthport, again, it's just a platform, so it's an execution engine only. We like an exchange, like the JSE, but we like a JSE for retail products, if you think about it. So we actually don't manage your money. You would go to an advisor, and we always recommend going, one of the things we really pride ourselves on, we work closely with independent advisors. All our brokers are independent advisors. Why do we do that? And the reason for that is a lot of the advice in this industry today belongs to companies. So you get what we call a tied advisor. So they may belong to a big life company or a bank. Now, the chances are if they work for a tied agency, they're going to try and sell you that company's product.
Absolutely.
So suddenly you move away from advice to being sold product. And that is what put a lot of people off going to see advisors, because they feel like, we spoke about it earlier, that you come in and you feel like someone's going to try and sell you something. And that's not the reason why clients go to see an advisor. They go to see an advisor because they want financial peace of mind. And ideally, they'd like to go to an advisor and walk out there having bought nothing. And again, I use a medical profession. If we go and see a doctor, we hope after the medical he says, you're perfect, you don't need anything. And the same with advice. But let's say, for example, there is a problem. What the advisor is there to do and the doctor is to say, here's a plan, let's do X, Y, and Z. We can do a couple of things. We need to change your spending habits. We need to do this. But if you were to say, here's a product, just like a doctor would say, you need to get fit, you need to watch your diet. However, if we need to do some medication, here are our medication options. That's advice. And I think so what we try and do with Wealthport is partner with the best independent advisors. We try and make sure that the advice is always independent and objective so that you can have access to a wider range of product rather than have a platform where you are limited to a suite of product that suits the manufacturers. And I think that's one of the differentiators in Wealthport.
So if I come to Wealthport, I won't necessarily be engaging with you, the CEO. No. And I do understand, tell me a little bit about your background.
So my background, I come from a banking background. I was in corporate finance and I went to asset management. I managed some funds there called risk profile funds. So I've loved the investment industry. I spent some time in a life company for 2 years. And then I went out and started my own. And in fact, one of the reasons why we started the business was I became a little bit disillusioned with the financial services industry. And I thought it was kind of at that time when my father was retiring, and it really should have been a lot easier for me. He said to me, Eugene, find me a broker, and it should have been a lot easier for me to think, having dealt in this industry with advisors for many years. And then I started to realize the complexities that people face in picking an advisor and going to somebody that they trust. Who are these people? And I started to realize maybe there's an opportunity here to make a difference. And I remember my wife saying, you're quite critical of where you are right now. Why don't you do something to change the industry? And I said, well, one person can't really change the industry. But, she fired me up a little bit, and I said, well, let's have a crack at this. And that was the birth of building a platform that could provide wholesale pricing to clients. In other words, let's take the costs out of it. Let's give the clients a wider range of options, and let's partner with advisors who share our value system. So when you partner with Wealthport, if you go to our site, you will find advisors that are contracted to us. These are people that share our ethos of serving people. These are people that are independent. And so it's important for us that if we're going to be providing a product that the people that provide that product provide the appropriate advice and service clients properly, so that so anyone that engages with Wealthport has a positive experience. And I think that's what we aim to do, and it's growing. It's taken time, and I think when you're trying to be thorough and you're getting the right people on board, it doesn't happen overnight. But we've certainly seen over the last 2 years a big take-up, and that's been really exciting for us and certainly motivating.
I think one of the things that's very intimidating for people young and old, you just spoke about your dad who was going to retirement, and he needed to make certain that he invested his funds appropriately because he probably didn't want to be dependent on anyone. He wanted to know that he's going to retire in comfort. A lot of people don't think about that. There's the issue around mortality. Here's people thinking they're in their 60s, mid-60s, earlier, perhaps even a little later, have a little bit of money, and then decide, well, I don't know if I'm going to live for the next 5 or 10 years. I'm going to blow this and really lead the high life, not considering that they may live
Absolutely.
10 years longer, 20 years longer. What's going to happen to them then? We know what the state pensions look like. The state of the state pensions is in dire straits. So you can't even depend on that. And even if you do get a state pension, it's really nothing. So that's the one issue. On the other hand, we have the issue of the young man or young woman who's just entered the job market. They get their first few paychecks, and all they have on their minds is party, party, party. They're not interested in the future. I'm going to be young forever. What do I have to worry about for the future? So 2 very important questions and statements that I'm posing to you. Let's respond to them right after the ad break.
Super.
Eugene Marie is in studio with me. He is with Wealthport. He is the CEO, and he's here to talk about your future financial planning. It is important. It is said that we are living longer because we're living such good quality lives. So we need to plan, because we're not going to die off at 50 or 60. We're going to be around for a long time, and we need to make sure that we live in comfort. We're talking to Eugene Marie from Wealthport. He is the CEO, and we're talking about financial planning. We're talking about your future. We're talking about your retirement years. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're old and you find that you haven't planned adequately, and then your children or relatives are having to look after you, and then the resentment and bad vibes start setting in. And also, one of the reasons why there's a breakdown in family relationships, because people want to pass the buck. Passing the buck of, it's your responsibility to take care of the older people, or you're the eldest son or you're the eldest daughter, and the resentment creeps in and families literally break down. I would be correct in saying that, wouldn't I?
Yeah, I think it's a big challenge. And we talk about this era now of the sandwich generation. I think this addresses your points you made earlier about retired people. There's a lack of understanding in education. We built some really nice tools where people can work out how much they could draw down and how long their money would last, which would give them at least it stops them from blowing it all, as you're saying, just like go and have a party. And the other problem is that you're actually probably going to live longer than you think. With modern medicine, your problem is not dying, your problem is living.
Absolutely.
And in fact, what's even worse is you may live with a stroke and something. So you're not dead, but you're even more of a burden in the sense that you're older, you've got medical bills that are far bigger than you ever anticipated, but you're still alive. So these are big challenges that are facing the elderly. The problem we have right now is the youth side, we've got guys that are not saving, but we've got another big problem, is we've got the sandwich generation. We've got the people that are probably now between their 40s and their 60s who are supporting not only their parents, but are supporting their kids. Now, if we don't change this, what will happen is they'll never have enough money to put aside for their own retirement. So when it gets to their kids becoming 40, 50, they'll be supporting the parents and trying to support the kids. So the only way we're going to change this cycle is we need to educate the kids. I mean, it's probably in many cases too late for our parents if they're in their 70s, but certainly it's an opportunity for our kids. Let me give you some interesting things. So one of the things I've tried to do is, from our children's point of view, is to educate them around saving. So if they have their pocket money, whatever's left at the end of every month, I'll double that for them to try and encourage them. And I'll give you a simple example. So let's just take a guy who starts saving in his 20s. If he saves 1,000 Rand a month until he's 31, in other words, he's been saving for 10 years, 11 years, so that's 132 periods. So let's just assume there's been no growth and he's got 132,000 Rand invested at 31. And his friend says, I think that's a great idea. And he starts saving at 32, okay, 1,000 Rand a month. And the first guy stops saving. Do you know his friend never ever catches him? And just think about that. I'll do the simple maths for you. The guy saved 1,000 Rand a month, 132 periods. He's got 132,000 Rand. If he gets a 10% return, he's going to get 13,100 Rand a year. His friend's only saving 12,000 Rand. And his friend's money is only going to grow by 10% on the 12,000. He's grown by 10% on the 132,000,
Wow.
which becomes 140. So his friend never can. It just shows you by starting early. The interesting thing is if you just take any investment, so let's just say we save 100,000 Rand and we save it and we just leave it for 10 years, for 7 years at 10% return, you're nearly doubling your money every 7 years. So think of some of the wonderful saving vehicles for young people. You take, for example, the tax-free savings account, where the growth is tax-free in that investment, and you can contribute up to 36,000 Rand a year. Now, if you had to say that, and your maximum you can save there is 500,000. So let's say for example, you save for your kids 500,000 by the time they're 21. And we know the money's going to double every 7 years. So from 21 to 65, what is it, 44 years. So let's call it six doubling periods, 6 sevens, okay. So 6 doubling periods. So we take 500,000 when the kid turns 21, and they do nothing with it to their retirement. And we double it every 6 times. So we go, 500 becomes 1 million, becomes 2 million, becomes 4 million, becomes 8 million, becomes 16 million, becomes 32 million. That's just over that period if we add nothing to it. Okay.
Amazing.
So
it sounds too good to be true.
But the thing is, it's easier than people think.
Absolutely.
The problem is that saving for young people isn't that exciting. That's like we were saying earlier. The young guy who's got a fancy car and spending money at the night,
or going on exotic holidays every so often or every year,
is far more attractive than the person who's steadily saving money.
But they may argue with you and I and say, but I've lived a full,
Absolutely.
adventurous, fun-filled life, whereas you've just been sitting there doing nothing and just saving your money, and you're going to kick the bucket one of the days and your children are going to enjoy it. But be that as it may, let's get back to senior citizens. Let's look at a retiree. Let's look at someone at age 60 or above. Mm-hmm. They've gone into retirement, they've got a bit of money saved. At that point, once they get that retirement saving of theirs, they get paid out by their company, is it a good idea that they reinvest that into a special type of an account to see them through their retirement years? Or should they now enjoy their money?
Well, the problem is, it's to understand that that pot of money has to provide you with an income going forward. Now, the only difficulty is we never know when we're going to die. So that's the variability. We don't know how long the pot's going to live. Now,
True.
I'm not saying don't live. You need to, if you've worked hard your whole life, reward yourself. Be sensible, Be careful how you spend your money. But if you have a sense of awareness of what that money can generate in terms of income. So think of it if you had to go in a very simple way that most people understand. If they took the money and went and bought a flat. Okay. Here's one way. You went and bought a flat and there was a tenant in there paying rental every month. And you know the rentals are going up. You know what you can spend because that's the only money you get. But your capital is tied up in a property. It's no point you need money to sell the kitchen or you sell the bathroom.
True.
So you need to...
However, property is still one of the best investments, isn't it?
It's a solid investment, very good investment, and certainly should be part of a portfolio. There are many different streams of income. I think for young people, when you get older, I think there's other ways of looking at it, but property makes a lot of sense. One is that your rentals often keep up with inflation, and you have this capital appreciation. The only problem is it's not very liquid. So let's say, for example, you have a big expense and you need something, you can't, as I said, you can't go and sell the kitchen.
Absolutely.
So you have no liquidity. So it's a combination of having property and some liquidity in your portfolio. Now, for young people, property makes a lot of sense. And the reason for that is it's very difficult to borrow money to invest. The bank's not going to do that for you. But you can get a home loan. You can get a loan and you can put a tenant into a property. And so there you can gear yourself, you can use debt. So there's bad debt. Motor cars is bad debt. Consumption is bad debt. Loans are bad debt. An asset that's generating an income is good debt. So that's the one opportunity where you can buy a very big asset using the bank's money, putting a tenant in to help repay. So that is a very smart investment for young people. So building up a property portfolio or having access to property is a smart thing. And that along with other types, but it's a discipline. There's not just one type of investment. What I get concerned about today is I see a lot of people, young people have lost hope in the investment market because the returns have been pretty low. So they start to do more aggressive things like cryptocurrencies. Now, those are interesting.
Your thoughts on cryptocurrencies? I've had a couple of people in and out the studio talking about it, and I'll be very honest with you, I still can't get my head around it.
Well, I think cryptocurrencies are real, and they're here to stay. I think they're going to stabilize, and I think you're going to get a point where, the general population or the world, if you see there's a big shift in the way the world is working. And I think that people are starting to get or they're starting to have distrust for major institutions. And they're starting to look for alternatives. So I think the problem with cryptocurrencies as they currently are is they use a speculative product. So it's a supply and demand investment product.
And that's what frightens me, because it's nothing tangible.
Well,
it's, nothing concrete. I need to see, feel and touch, and then I'll be happy.
Yeah. But the funny thing, money is neither. Really, the money exists because there's a willingness for someone to accept it as a currency.
Sure.
But there's no goal behind it anymore like the old days. So the paper money, digital money, I think it's much of a muchness. It's about adoption. If everyone were to adopt Bitcoin or one of these cryptocurrencies, or you could pay for it everywhere, I think that would be the beginning of it. I think the problem with it right now is that the volatility of it makes it very difficult, because if you do adopt Bitcoin and I put the price in my store at 10 Bitcoins for this item, tomorrow it could be 30 Bitcoins, and next day it could be 5 Bitcoins, too much volatility. So I think when the volatility comes out, and I think the consumption or the adoption of Bitcoins or any other cryptocurrencies becomes adopted, I think you're going to see a much bigger take. I think they're here to stay. I think they need to find their way. As an investment product, it's a little bit speculative.
Okay,
I certainly wouldn't put my life in it, but I'd have a bet.
We'll watch the space closely.
Exactly.
Your advice to young people, what are the 4 or 5 really crucial steps and things to think about as young people as far as future financial planning is concerned, without them being frightened off? We still want to leave them with money to have a great life,
Absolutely.
have a bit of fun, etc.
Sure.
What would be the percentage that you should be forgetting about, making sure that you put aside every month, and the 3 or 4 or 5, whatever steps they are, that are absolute must-haves, must-dos in your life?
Okay, so first thing is when you earn a salary, you pay tax. Okay, you don't have a choice. Okay, so start to think of your savings like a tax. Okay, it's your future tax.
That's clever.
Yeah. So say, listen, I'm going to pay tax. So 10% of my gross salary I'm going to put aside every month. That's adequate.
10%.
Just 10%. If you start with 10, if you can be disciplined enough to put 10% from when your first paycheck, that means enough money for you to go out and spend. The interesting thing is when you start to look at things like motor vehicles and all that kind of stuff, don't go to the bank and say, how much finance can I get? Okay, because you say, how much motor car can I buy with that much money? So rather go and look at the motor car you want, and then if the bank's prepared to give you more money, you don't need to take more money. Okay, that's crazy. So decide what you need, and what you want are 2 different things.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay? And I can promise you, one day when you're old and you don't have enough money, you would have forgotten about that GTI you bought, and you could have easily have just gone for the lower model, or you could have gone for the Polo rather than the Golf. You could have made these little compromises, because you'll drive them for a month or 2 or a year, and you'll get bored of them. And so the problem is, when you're older and you've got no money, you'll be very sorry. So if you look at your future self, so if I had to take most people today and I said, if you smoke, you're going to get cancer, and I could prove to you you'd stop smoking. Okay, so the difference is, because we know certain things, we behave in a certain way because people don't want to do this, because they're worried about their health. You should think about that with your finances as well. Is you need to look at, say, if I look at the future, in my future, what am I doing right now? The beautiful thing about smoking, or difference between smoking, is smoking, you might smoke and never get cancer, but you may get it earlier. The thing about putting aside money is I can guarantee if you do the right things, the outcome's going to be good. But I can also guarantee if you don't do anything, the outcome's going to be poor. So the things you need to do is treat it like a tax in your life. Just say, this is my tax. Okay. And if you do that discipline, you'll be blown away. The first few years won't be that spectacular, but it'll start to all add up. Just the discipline and the start.
We've almost come to wrap up time. The one question I do want to put to you is the issue around the instability in the country. Yes. When I say instability, obviously I'm talking about all of the scandals and young people being very disillusioned about, is there a future for them in the country? With that at the back of their minds, do they still do financial planning?
Absolutely. So here, it doesn't matter what happens in your environment, and you still need to think about the future. Okay, and I think, to think that you're going to die tomorrow, that's just not a way to plan for the future. So let's look at a couple of things. One is invest in yourself, all right? Despite what happens in the country, your skill set, one of the best investments you can make is your skill set. There will always be pockets of opportunity. No matter what happens in the country, you look at there are all entrepreneurs, there are always opportunities to make business, and what you want to try and do is save with that so you have different streams of income. So even if you're got a business generating income, your savings will ultimately, because your business may not last forever, it may change, and you want that. Secondly is, don't be too pessimistic. The one beautiful thing that's going to happen in South Africa and it's going to happen in the world is technology. Technology is incredible. Today you're going to have developers, and I think one of the things that could happen in South Africa, if the government could get their act together on this, is the opportunity. They talk about the Silicon Cape and that kind of stuff. But I was in the Silicon Valley 6-7 weeks ago, and if I looked at what happens there...
Silicon Valley in the States.
In the States, yeah. And if you look at what's happening there, the developers, today you can have developers, they're already outsourcing. Developers are becoming so expensive there that they start to outsource to Russia, to India. Exactly.
Yes.
And South Africa is
all
a
around
perfect
the world.
destination. Here we can take somebody who's never done coding experience, and with certain courses we can get them full coding, full stack coding within 6 months. Now a degree takes 4 years. Now they could be coders.
Can I ask you to hold that thought, please? It is so important, and I'd like
Sure.
to expand further on it, and I think it's really important. So let's go for an ad break and come back and then expand further. We'll be back with you in a minute or two. Eugene Marais from Wealthport is our in-guest studio, and he's truly raised some very important issues. So we're keeping him here a little longer, another 5-6 minutes, just for him to wrap up and leave us with lots to think about and lots of important information. I've threw a lot of questions to you before the ad break, so you want to respond to that as well. Let's also look at the future of the work of world, how it's going to change, and then also how does one begin to calculate. Let's assume someone at 30 or 40 is watching us this morning. How do they calculate what they're going to need for their retirement?
Sure. Okay, so this is the future of work, and I think this is very interesting. And I think the one opportunity for Africa that's incredible is that if you look at what's going to happen in the technology space, is coding, or the ability to code or provide that kind of work, is quite unique in the sense that most parts, and again geographically, Africa in many ways has been isolated. So if you look at manufacturing and how a lot of manufacturing has moved to other parts of the world, the one thing about technology era can provide for us is create employment for South Africa and for the rest of Africa, in the sense that where you build a house, you need to have all your laborers on site, and everyone has to build a house. Today we can build technology sitting in Cape Town, Port Elizabeth, Durban, Johannesburg, and you could be building some technology business that's based in Russia, United States, London, and so the ability for that is going to change the way people look at being employed. So I think when you look at South Africa, you're looking at yourself geographically, and I think you've got to start to think of yourself as more of a global citizen. And I think younger people are seeing that. And your ability to move with things like computers and coding and that kind of stuff, it's a universal language. And so we're going to see some of the more developed world where labor is expensive, outsourcing to some of the developing world, where we've got great skills, people that have got disciplines, who've got great levels of education. And I think this could be the saving grace for Africa. We've got to start thinking about resources. And resources are one component. We've got to think one of our greatest resources is our people. And if we're really going to plug into that we can liberate.
Okay, so we're talking human resources, and I'm also wondering about the, obviously, globalization, the fourth industrial revolution, yes. But that also then one wonders about the manual production lines, human labor, etc. What's going to happen? Look, a lot of us are being educating our children. We're well educated. We can sell our skills. But what about manual labor? Is there still going to be a space for manual labor? And those people that haven't managed to get an education, what's going to happen to them?
So you're absolutely right. I think it will have some effects on manual labor, and I think companies that are responsible and will change, and the type of work. I was in China 2 years ago, and I was at a plant, and I saw these robots, and I said to one of the manufacturing people, they said, we're going to robotize this plant. I said, well, when you put these robots in, what happens to the people? And they said, well, who really wants to be doing this kind of manual labor anyway? So what we do is we reskill them into marketing, into sales, into other creative aspects, into product design. So that can't happen with everybody. But I think if companies and people start to be forward thinking, the one advantage again is open the playing field. So for example, the difference between manual labor is it's isolated to where the markets are. And that's the thing that we must think about as Africans and be optimistic as Africans as a whole, is that now we can be part of the global economic structure because manufacturing plants don't necessarily have to exist here. So while there will be job losses in some areas and when factors of production become expensive, they'll be able to move some of those factors of production. So in many cases, some of the emerging markets might be huge beneficiaries of this. So I think there's going to be re-engineering. There's no doubt there'll be changes. But all those changes, the world adapts. And I think that's the one thing, is to be flexible. But it's just adapting at a faster rate than people probably anticipated.
We digressed a bit, but
Sure.
I think it really does tie in with everything we're talking about, and that
Sure.
is being savvy about future financial planning. Let's summarize what we've covered this morning and why what we've raised now about the fourth industrial revolution has relevance to the topic of discussion this morning.
Okay, firstly, technology is your friend. Okay, so work with advisors that are using technology, because technology is here to help you and here to guide you. That's the first thing. I would say to most people, get good independent financial advice so that you don't feel like you've been sold a product. Okay, go and see a good independent advisor. They will help you. The right type of advisor you shouldn't be scared of. He's not going to try and sit and try and put you on a plan, a course. Okay. When it comes to retirement planning and how much is enough, just an interesting rule of thumb is if you draw 6% of your retirement capital, that means your money will never run out. So let's just assume that's the gold standard. 6%, if you really think about it, is around 5,000 Rand per million. So for every million Rand that you retire with, you can only draw 5,000 Rand if you want your capital to last forever. Obviously, if you draw more than that, you start to eat into your capital. And if your fees are big, they also start to eat into your capital. So if you're paying 3% in fees, which is kind of the industry average, you're drawing 5, but you're actually drawing 8. So if you can get those fees down to 1.5%, and we see many guys being able to do that, then it makes a big difference. So watch the fees, understand what it needs to do. It's not, money doesn't last forever. Get good financial advice, because with a good independent advisor, they'll give you a good plan. And it doesn't mean you have to live without having a little bit of fun, but just have it measured. Just be responsible about it.
Right. Finally, retirement annuities, what should people be looking out for? Because that also runs out if you haven't allowed for the time frame for your payouts. How does that work?
So you can buy
it's not a situation where, it's going to pay up until you die, because if you don't plan that properly, you could actually run out of that before you die.
Sure. So there's a difference between a life annuity, where you can buy a fixed annuity, which means that you'll get paid by the particular company that sells that annuity. They'll pay you for the rest of your life until you're dead. The problem with those, often the challenges with those, is sometimes the number that comes out is so low that the people can't come out on them. So they're tempted to go into what they call a living annuity, where they invest their own capital. Remember, if you buy a life annuity and you die, the capital is lost. It goes to the company. Okay. A living annuity, if you manage your money, you still have control over your capital. But then often the drawdown rates are higher, so often the money can run out. So that's what good advice will teach you. And we have a fantastic tool that helps you model your cash flows. So it helps optimize your drawdown. And that tool will show you can optimize your drawdown by increase it by up to about 25%. And that's because you have the right kind of planning processes. So those are living annuity. Just while we're talking about retirement annuity, which you mentioned, great saving vehicle for young people, because they can go and they can buy a retirement annuity. Remember, government's going to give you the tax back on your contributions. So if you're saving 100 Rand and you're paying tax of 30%, you get back 30%. So you get the benefit of saving 100, but you're only effectively saving 70. And that will make that saving. So if we talk about the tax of the person saving 10% of the income, if they're saving 10% of the income to retirement annuity, they're going to get 30% of their back. So effectively they're only saving 7, but they're getting the benefit of 10. So these are great little disciplines and great tools for people.
Your take-home message to our viewers today would be?
Never too late to start and never too early to start. So the bottom line is, if you haven't done it and you've put it off, don't put your head in the sand. Start doing something, get some good advice, and if you're young and you can start with something, I'll tell you, you'll be grateful for the rest of your life. And if you remember this conversation, never too early and it's never too late.
Eugene Marie, thank you indeed for being with us on the show this morning. And of course, you are the CEO of Wealthport. Do you have a website address for our viewers to go to?
Just go to wealthport.co.za.
As simple as that.
www.wealthport.co.za. Thank you for the wonderful opportunity, Julie. Now, thanks to your viewers.
It was lovely talking to you. Thank you so much. That was Eugene Marie from Wealthport talking to us about future financial planning. I hope that you've picked up some good tips, and if you haven't started your future financial planning, please, 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 it's never too late or never too early. Nishan Bolton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation is in studio this morning to talk to us about the fight back against state capture. Interesting, important, and very, very relevant indeed. Good morning, welcome to the program.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers as well.
Nishan, you had a campaign this past Sunday. It was at the Johannesburg City Hall, am I correct? An invitation was put out to all media houses and the public as well, and people that you believed were relevant in this fight against state capture. When and how did this come about?
Our interest in the issue of state capture starts as far back as when the Guptas landed at Waterkloof. The foundation and Uncle Kathy in particular were very concerned and raised the question that we needed...
Back way then?
Yes, we raised the question that we needed to understand how this newly arrived family had so much pull and power in South Africa that they were able to do what they did. And we said something is wrong in the country for this to be able to happen. And subsequent to that, we continuously started raising issues about particularly the Guptas at the Zoo Lake, their various business dealings and so forth. And
the Zoo Lake issue was the helicopter
landing. They landed the helicopter there,
right.
Did all kinds of things which they weren't supposed to do. And it said to us something was wrong. We were also mindful that what was happening in society was the Guptas becoming synonymous for all people of Indian descent. And we needed to show that this was in fact not true, that these were people who were really involved in something which we couldn't at that point explain, but was something that was untoward. Subsequent to that, you had the Nkandla scandal, you had a whole range of things, and then you had the Public Protector's report. With the Public Protector's report, Uncle Kathy then broke ranks and wrote openly to the president and asking him to resign.
And I think that letter was widely circulated.
That letter then gave, I think, impetus to a number of other people to start coming out and speaking about what is now being called state capture.
Now, during this time, you talk about the Guptas landing at Waterkloof. There was also that big debacle with the wedding at the Sun City,
yes.
which the who's who of South Africa were invited and felt very good about attending that wedding. In retrospect, you realize just what a big shame it was, and those who's who as well, I think, need to bow their heads down in shame for boasting about having been attendees at that wedding.
And worse, today we know that wedding was in fact funded by South African taxpayers. Yesterday you saw at the Zondo Commission the Estina Dairy Farm project, where hundreds of poor farmers were really robbed of their livelihoods, money on their behalf taken away, taken by this family, and I think the Gupta leaks have shown how this money then pays for their wedding at Sun City. And that just rubs salt into the wound. So,
and you know, as Muslims, what we say is all of those monies and whomever it was spent on and whoever benefited from it, as Muslims we know, is totally haram. And you have close ties with the Muslim community as well, and you would agree with me as far as that is concerned.
Well, I think it's a sentiment shared by the majority of South Africans who are concerned about corruption and state capture. And it's we're not saying that it's only the Guptas who were involved in state capture, but they were really in the forefront of this. I think they are the face of state capture in this country, together with the politicians that they worked with and the public servants that they worked with and the board members of state-owned enterprises that they worked with to essentially cripple this country. So to answer your question, what we are doing now is consistent with what we started in 2013, only at a different level. The Kathrada Foundation then...
How old is the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation?
This year will be 11 years.
11 years already. So it was just around that time as well when Ahmed Kathrada Foundation was formed, when all of this rot was beginning to rear its head.
Slightly later, 4 years after our formation. And so for Uncle Kathy, the upholding the Constitution, protecting our democracy, strengthening our democracy, is something that is synonymous with his life.
Absolutely.
Which is why I think he was so worried and angered by this to do what he did. And we the foundation, with his blessing, became part of what was called Safe South Africa at the time. At the very same time when current Minister Pravin Gordhan was going to be charged for the very same charges that he's facing today.
Of course.
The 2nd of November 2016, a huge rally in Pretoria, called to basically voice public concern about the emergence of what we know as state capture. On that same day, the NPA withdrew their charges because they knew that it wasn't going to stick, and brought it back in different ways subsequent to that. We then moved to a situation where huge public uproar, the removal of President Zuma, the change of leadership. But the phenomenon of state capture doesn't go away. The new president comes in, sets up all of these commissions, work gets to start. But in the process, the beneficiaries of state capture don't sit quiet. They have got all of these billions stored away in different parts of the world. And it is our contention that those who have the most to lose are now fighting back in different ways. So how are they fighting back? They get charges reinstated, we think through the public protector against Minister Gordhan, but the ultimate target here is President Ramaphosa, and you've seen that. And both of them have now taken these cases on review. What this, however, has shown is that they want to change the story away from getting us to focus away from those who are involved in state capture, but to whether there was a rogue unit, whether Ivan Pillay had the necessary qualifications. And they create a whole range of side stories to then get South Africans to really doubt the credibility of the president, Minister Gordhan, and other organizations who have opposed state capture. And they do this because at some point they hope that the credibility of the president and those who support him will create the kinds of tensions, particularly within the governing party, so that he himself is sidelined and perhaps recalled. And which,
sadly, the tensions are beginning to grow.
No, and this fuels it. Mm-hmm. So the objective is to get back into power, is to get back into office, is to stop the cleanup. So our campaign is to basically make society aware of what is happening, is to find ways of ongoing exposure and tackling of state capture. There are a whole range of civil society organizations doing work on this.
And in all of this, there's a lot of fake news going out as
Extremely.
well. And if you're not savvy enough, you're going to get sucked into all of the fake news. How does the ordinary layperson then distinguish what is factual, what is false? That's the big issue, isn't it?
It is a huge issue. It's very difficult, which is why part of our campaign is to do a whole lot of grassroots-based work, educational work, information work about, firstly, just reminding people what is state capture, who were the real victims of state capture, who are the beneficiaries of this, and in that process identify the issues of fake news and how that relates to where we are as a country today. And we are going to have to do that through a whole range of organizations across the country, but also through consistent media work like I'm trying to do here this morning.
Nishan, having said that, what was targeted at the campaign? How did people respond on Sunday at the City Hall? What is it and how is it that you want civil society to become involved?
So a couple of things. Sunday was a huge rally at the City Hall. That we held in collaboration with the South African Communist Party. And for us, it was important that a structure of the ANC alliance be seen to be vocal on this issue, and we're grateful to the Communist Party for having done that. They have been consistent on this issue for a very long time. And the party, and there's about 30 odd organizations who signed this particular declaration, and these organizations and ourselves and others will gather on Saturday to flesh out the details of this campaign and to work out where our respective areas of strength is, So, for example, some people will look at the electoral system and the changes to our electoral system, because our electoral system is part of the cause of that enables state capture in this country. Because you don't vote for a candidate.
Absolutely.
You vote for a party. When that person goes into parliament, they, as they've done previously, would refuse to hold the former president to account because they were scared of their own job. So we think our electoral system has to change. We think the issue of party political funding is very important, that as voters, we know who's funding these organizations, who funds them.
Because you have to pay back at some stage or the other. You've got to pay back those favors.
Yes. So the greater transparency around that's another leg of this campaign. The third issue is around how...
Just on party funding, you do need the funding, don't you?
But it must be transparent.
Okay.
So I think what we're simply saying is that it as you would see with the current issue around the president and the funding of his internal campaign, I think it's important that all of that is exposed. Likewise, all of the candidates who were contesting for ANC elections or for any party elections, it's important for us to know who's funding them. Because what you will be able to see later on, or what you don't want to see, is linkages between the party funding and tenders that companies get.
The favors I'm talking
about. When they
about.
get linked up, then you show that something is wrong. So changing our governance structures in the country is one big thing.
How doable is that going to be, and how long is it going to take?
My guess, it's a 10-year project. Electoral cycles are almost fixed, but if there's societal consensus that the change is required and we agree on what kinds of models are required, what changes are in fact required, getting it into the electoral cycle and changing the whole system, I don't think can be done within the 5-year period. I hope I'm wrong, but part of what we are hoping to do is to get people to start talking about this thing and to start presenting the proposals and the details, and then to start lobbying for it. At the moment, all of us know that the system has to be changed. I don't think there's consensus on how it needs to be changed. Accountability mechanism is the second area, or rather the third area, is how do we hold members of parliament, the president, government, the post office manager, the police station, how do we hold them to account as citizens? What are the mechanisms that allow us to do that? And when we find that they're not accountable, what do we do? So, for example, in Indonesia, there's a post office badly kept. Our youth, together with the former MEC Vadi, do a cleanup campaign. But then we ask the question, why are we doing this thing? Where's the budget for the post office? The Postmaster General himself doesn't know. It takes the minister to respond to this via Twitter, to send a team to come and clean up. But at this point in time, we still don't know, because I'm sure in the budget of that post office, there is an allocation to keep it clean. It's either being misspent or it's redirected elsewhere. And that's the simple accountability that we need to be building from top to bottom.
Absolutely. And if you start from the bottom, you get to the top very easily.
Yes. So the appointment of public servants, their criteria for appointment, the non-partisan nature of the appointment is another area of work. Too often, public servants get appointed only because of party loyalty. And what happens then is when you have things like Life ECD, public servants will not or wouldn't be able to stand up to an instruction that is illegal and is not lawful. So in that case, they didn't speak up. They carried out the work that they should never have done because they felt loyalty to the party, they felt loyalty to the MEC. And that goes for all cases of corruption. Ultimately, somebody signs off for the money to be paid out. And that means you need a new kind of public servant with ethics, with integrity, but also public servants who will, as I think a few have stood up, like Temba Maseko and others, where they refuse to do the things that are wrong. Lastly, it revolves around a huge public campaign about integrity and ethics of those in office, and with the issues of accountability and so forth. There are two specific areas of campaigning.
We've got a minute to wrap up.
The public protector is an issue that we are focusing on.
And EFF paying for Gordon's blood, what's going on there? What's happening behind the scenes there?
I'm happy that the minister has taken his case to court yesterday, and I think the court will award in his favor, which essentially means giving or not carrying out the parts of government that she has instructed to do remedial measures. He's asking for that to be postponed until his case is properly heard. And I'm afraid, I think the public protector is possibly going to lose this case, the case against the president and Ivan Pillay, which will ultimately strengthen the case for her removal as the public protector by Parliament.
We've run out of time. It's a pity. We should have had more time to talk about so many other issues.
Not a problem. We can come back.
Regarding state capture. Yes, we do need to have you back in again. What do we as lay people or civil society need to do to back you in your fight against this and other such corrupt activities in the country?
One, make your voices known or heard through your organizations. Two, always verify information that is out there. Go to the source. Don't believe everything that is out there. And thirdly, on issues and campaigns that you will begin to see and hear from us, we need all of the support that is necessary.
Oh, we certainly are behind you all the way. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Please do come in again and talk some more. Just bring us up to date as to what is happening. It is our duty to bring these type of stories and issues to the public's attention.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Nishan Bolton from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation talking about the fight against corruption in the country and, of course, very importantly, state capture. Welcome back to the final segment of the show this morning, or rather the final interview. I'm talking with Maulana Mohammed Ashraf Patel. We're looking at the importance of Islamic guidance in business, and I think what we're also going to raise on the show this morning is the issue of halal and haram. I think we take it very literally. We take it only at the surface. We walk into a supermarket and try and make absolutely certain that what we are buying is halal. We look for the halal certification, and yes, it's important, but I think halal goes way, way beyond that. But Maulana Patel is going to outline all of that for us on the show this morning. Assalamu alaikum, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
My pleasure entirely, because we're discussing, we as Muslims, we as born Muslims take this issue for granted.
Yes.
Because the assumption is that I'm a born Muslim, I'm going to be brought up with strict guidelines of halal and haram and Islamic guidance in every aspect of my life. Sadly, somewhere along the line, we kind of fall away, we are sidetracked, and to make ourselves feel good or feel righteous about our actions, our misdirected actions, we rationalize that the principles are very archaic, they're outdated, they don't apply to these modern times.
You see, it all starts from a couple of generations before, where the importance of sending your kids to madrasa, which is the maktab system, has gained less and less importance, and they've raised more and more importance towards secular studies such as universities, school, and so on, which is totally incorrect. We as Muslims, we are guided by the Quran and the Sunnah, whereby Allah Ta'ala has actually instructed us on how to do business and what is halal, what is haram, how to live our life. The Quran and the Sunnah is actually a life manual, and there's no other religion which actually gives you a life manual. So basically, if you follow the Quran and the Sunnah, it actually tells you A to Z on how to live your life. Just like how when you have a washing machine and you install a washing machine at home and you don't look at the user manual, you're going to try and figure out how to use this machine. You're going to put some cotton in there, and then you're going to try and wash polyester. It just won't work. It's going to damage your clothing. And you're going to put extra soap or little soap, whatever. You need to read a manual. Similarly with Islam, alhamdulillah, Islam is those who are within the fold of Islam have the facility to read the Quran and the Sunnah, also have access to other ulama who can actually guide them spiritually as well as physically, in order for them to be able to do anything in their lives, how they must get married, what they must eat, what food, how they must dress, exercising, A to Z is actually there. So we should be looking more towards the Quran and Sunnah for that. Now the maktab system, if you send your kids to the maktab from the beginning, and you ensure that just like how you want them to finish matric, they should actually go to the maktab system and finish up to class 10 or higher, you will notice that you're actually giving them life skills, because in the maktab system they will be taught A to Z on how to run their lives. Those who will run through to class 10 will be more successful in their lives because they have been taught from the Quran and the Sunnah, which is from Allah Ta'ala and Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, on how to actually live their lives. Once they are out there after class 10, which I think is a definition around the age of 16 or so, they'll be more, they'll have the tools and they'll be more ready in order to take on the world, to take on life, we actually just posted something before I came onto the show on my Instagram that what is the difference between school and life? In school, you are taught a lesson and then taken a test on it. And in life, you are tested, which teaches you a lesson. Absolutely. So this is very, very important now. The thing is that a lot of us, because we don't have this guidance and we don't follow the Quran and the Sunnah, we are taught, we actually pay very high school fees on the mistakes that we make. True. Especially when it gets through to business and so on, because this talks a little bit about business. So once you have been taught in madrasa or in maktab on how to operate and how to improve your akhlaq, that alone is the first step on how to basically operate yourself in business. Because remember one thing, in business, first and foremost, you have staff members. And if you do not have good akhlaq and you're going to go and start shouting and swearing at the staff members, which is not what Muslims do. In fact, there's so many hadith that tells you on how to treat staff. Even one where you've got to pay your staff before his sweat dries. Now in today's time is not the way that people are doing. As a result, the staff turnaround turns a lot, and you have new staff all the time, and because you have new staff all the time, you have an unstable business, and that alone basically gives you the first problem. Before you even get to halal and haram, the first problem is that you have an unstable business.
What worries me about what you're sharing with me now is I'm a born Muslim.
Yes.
I know all of this, and I have no doubt in my mind that every other Muslim watching us this morning know all of this. Why are we not practicing it? Why are we making people miserable? Why is it that when we have people in our employ, we dehumanize them by insulting them, making them feel that we're doing them a favor by having them in our employ, and we lord it over them. We want to be treated like kings and queens. We want them to be subservient to us. We treat them so inhumanely, and then we still put our head on that musalla 5 times a day and go to bed at night thinking that I'm a good Muslim.
You see, this whole world, any religion, there's a huge fight between good and evil. And no matter how much good you have, you'll have evil coming at you harder. So the person who is doing a lot of good is going to be actually enticed to go on to evil as much as possible. As a result of that, then the person, a Muslim itself, has to ensure, and it also says in the Quran and Hadith, that stay with the pious, remain with the pious. Around you have people who are pious. Why? Because the same pious people will be able to give you guidance, and a spiritual guidance, not only a physical guidance, but a spiritual guidance in order for you to improve your iman, to strengthen your iman. So the stronger you have your iman, this point is you're going up and down 5 times a day, but if you have no sincerity in it, you see, when you go to the masjid, for example, and you're praying your salah, it could be for show. It could be for whatever it is. But the things that if deep inside you, you have good people around you who are giving you the good guidance and spiritually uplifting you all the time by you attending talks and by you reading your zikr and your Quran Sharif in the mornings and things like that, because they will entice you to do that, they will motivate you to do that. So basically what happens is that then your fear of Allah will grow and your iman will get stronger. When your iman gets stronger, then you're going to, before you even shout at a staff member, you're going to think, you know what, Allah Ta'ala has will be upset if I do that. Let me just approach it in a different way. Or if somebody comes through and say, you know what, I got this at half the price because of this and this and that. So you're going to say, well, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm not interested, go away. But the thing is that if you don't fear Allah, and if you don't feel that Allah is seeing what you're doing and your actions and are being written on your shoulders, you will take it. But if you have the fear of Allah, then you're not going to take it. So the spiritual upliftment is extremely important, not just actions, but you have to have sincerity in it.
What are we doing wrong in our business practices, apart from treating, which is a big thing? It's number one on our list of don't do's. Apart from treating our staff very badly, very poorly, underpaying them, insulting them, threatening them, making the work environment so unpleasant that if the people could, if they'd had any other way, they wouldn't come to this workplace, because it is such a toxic environment for them to be in.
You know, your invitation towards the show came in at such a time that there's so many of these questions being asked at me at the moment. In fact, just on Monday, I received a WhatsApp message, and I think it went viral as well, that there was a story about Maulana Yunus Patel when his father-in-law went for Hajj, and he asked him, Maulana, please look after my shop. And, you know, his father-in-law went for a couple of months, I think 4 months or something like that. And basically what happened is that the neighbors were all seeing that this shop is, every time it's closing during Salah times and is opening up a bit later, etc., etc. And in fact, when some people came through, one customer came through and she purchased some items for about 10 rand or so, and they came to Maulana, and Maulana, they seen she was short. So Maulana looked at her and said, you know what, this seems to be a needy person. And Maulana actually told her, you know what, take the goods and take your 10 rand also and go, you know. So it's like sort of a charity. So when his father-in-law came down, there's quite a few other instances in it, but I'll keep it short. When his father-in-law came back, the neighbors and the friends said, you know what, your shop, you might just as well close it down, because when you weren't away, the shop was never opened, etc., etc. So when they sat down and did the books, the business actually went up by 30%. And not even come down, it went up by 30%. Right. Because you see, Allah Ta'ala is the sole provider of rizq. And the more good you do in the business, the more actually Allah Ta'ala will provide you. And that's what people don't understand. You know, when the time comes to pay zakat, they see it as a tax. It's not a tax, it's to cleanse your earnings. So basically, the more, if you're going to be paying your zakat timelessly and properly, you'll actually see the barakat in the business. I'm not saying you're going to be making more money, but whatever money you're making, it will stretch so much further, because your income is now purified. You see, it's all about the spirituality in it. And Allah Ta'ala is telling you, listen, pay your zakat, do your business the right way, don't sell stolen goods, or don't go into doubtful things, etc., etc. Even a simple thing like interest and things like that, you know, why go into it? I mean, nowadays, look, obviously the businessman should consult the local imam or the spiritual guide on how to handle that side. But there are so many Islamic banks whereby they don't touch interest at all, they don't give you the interest or whatever it is, they charge you a fixed fee, whatever the packages are. But there are many, many ways today to keep your business Islamically guided. And there are people who are out there, especially the ulama who are business inclined. They will be able to give you the right guidance onto that and how to do it. And even if they don't, nowadays with WhatsApp, and we've built networks whereby if somebody comes to ask me a question and I'm not familiar with it, I'll just ask in our ulama group, and I'll get so many responses and even books where to read and so on. I'll do my research and I'll respond. So the guides are there. We just need to make sure that we are spiritually walking the right line and not going out, not chasing money.
Okay, let's go for an ad break. We'll talk some more right after. Maulana Ashraf Patel is my guest. We're talking about keeping your business, obviously running a business under strict Islamic guidance, inshallah. And after the ad break, we're going to talk about issues around halal and haram, and importantly, family relations. How, if you don't upkeep respectful family relationships, it's not only going to impact your immediate family, but how it impacts the entire community. So stay with us. Maulana Muhammad Ashraf Patel is my guest. We started out by talking about proper Islamic guidance in your business, but off air we were just talking about proper Islamic guidance in your life, in your family, in your homes, in your community. If you get it right, like Maulana had started out by suggesting that we put strong emphasis on our children attending madrasa till grade 10 or grade 12, I'm not quite sure what it is these days. If we give them that strong Islamic backing, just imagine what a well-rounded youngster you'll have in your family. And if we too carry out those principles in our homes, we won't have to be here talking about Islamic guidance in our businesses, because everything we do will be Islamic correct.
That's correct, yes. So
when I think about the issues around, you know what comes to mind when I've, after that statement,
yes,
is selective Islam.
Yes.
Aren't we all guilty of it?
Yes, you see, the world today is such that we have the internet. And in the internet, we have access to a lot more information than what we had in the past. We have YouTube, we have WhatsApp. Sometimes you're in a hadith group, and every day you'll get a hadith, and you'll read this hadith if you get a chance, or you will sit down and see so many people on YouTube that are giving lectures and so on. The problem that we face is that there are so many of it today that you don't know who to listen to and who not, because there's many interpretations on the hadith and so on, which has been happening from the days of tabi'in, sahaba and so on. And that's why we have the four madhaib. Now, if you're going to be listening to someone on YouTube, it's a one-way information. It's not a two-way information. For example, you're listening to this one alim speaking to you on YouTube, and he's giving his lecture and he's giving his point of view. Now,
so you can't question.
You can't question, because now you might have a bit of doubt, or question, or you know what, you didn't really understand this properly. What is it about, and so on. So you can't really question. So although it's very useful to have this type of information, but it's very, very important. The masjid in the community is a center of your Islam. Everything happens in that masjid. So you need to link yourself up to one of those masjids. Your husband goes there on a daily basis, 5 times a day. There's one imam, 2 imam, however many people there are. There usually will be a group of other ulama that also attend to that masjid. So there's always people available there, so should you have any questions and so on. So say, for example, you are unclear about something to do with traveling, and instead of you going onto the internet and Googling it, and you listening to one point of view of it, which may not even be your madhaib, you rather go to your nearest masjid, or nowadays you have these community groups on WhatsApp. Just ask the Maulana, I need this, I need so-and-so's number. They'll call you, you call them, and just rather ask one-to-one. If you ask one-to-one, you will have the right information, because that community you're in will more than likely be the community of the madhaib that you follow.
Absolutely, but you're not saying stop watching and listening to these lectures. Perhaps you can engage, you can actually watch those. Inshallah will, give you clarity on certain issues.
Yes.
Maybe also hook you further into the deen.
Yes.
But with any issues, and I hear what you're saying, the sad thing is that it's not two-way.
Yes.
But any questions you may have, jot them down, take them to your local masajid. Ask questions. You may have friends who are very dini orientated, but ask. Don't walk around with misconceptions
100%,
in your head.
100%. You see, the person who you listen to as well, it has to be very selective, because you mentioned now about selective deen, you see. Now, say for example, you have one Mufti Sahib who you listen to every time on YouTube. Before you go further with this Mufti, say if it's somebody new, you rather just ask your local Imam, look, you've come across this person on YouTube, he's got 500 videos, can I watch him? So this Ali will probably know this person or do some research on it to make sure that he follows the same Aqidah as you, the same madhab as you, and so on. And he will tell you, yeah, sure, no problem, listen to him, he's all good. But there are many many different types of aqidas, and they might even be enemies of Islam who guide. The shaitan basically disguises himself, and then he starts sending you wrong information. And now, because he's sending you information in a way that you enjoy watching him, or maybe he's a handsome guy, or maybe he's doing things in a different way, whatever, you can't say. Now you're attracted to his lectures, and you're listening to him. In the meantime, he's not the right person to be giving you the guide.
You're making a very relevant point, and it's very, very worrisome, because we've got young people that are really hooked to the net. I mean, it's the fourth industrial revolution. This is the way we're sourcing information.
Yeah.
What is it that you want to tell the parents these days? How do we monitor? Because there's no doubt in my mind that our children, and even us for that matter, are consuming information from questionable sources. Yes. How do we verify?
This show, this invitation came really at a good time, because just last night I was at a community meeting, the drug community meeting. And when I went in, because we're doing some research for the Jummah Bayan coming up with awareness of drug awareness and so on. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening to these people talking about so and so, he's in remission and so on and so on. And then there's a lady there who comes regularly because everyone seems to know her, and she's not there because her son is on drugs. She's there because her son is addicted to his phone. And they're actually giving her advice on how to get him not addicted to his phone. So in the first place, we need to realize that, yes, a phone is very important. And if your child does not have access to the phone that you've given him, he will have access to it, to his friend's phone or whoever. He will definitely get access. But the first thing we need to do is that we need to ensure that we know, because that phone has got a lot of information on it, and no matter what apps you've added on that controls parental guidance, it helps to a certain level, but these kids, they know more than you on how to bypass
Absolutely.
it. So you need to ensure that you start giving him access to phones at the right age. That's the first thing. I'm not a child expert, so I can't tell you what age. In fact, you will know your child better. But you need to introduce the phone to the child at the right age as the first thing. And secondly, it's your job as a parent to actually teach the child responsibility and how to use the phone and who to listen to, and so on and so on. In today's time, you have strangers who are enticing the kids to come out, they get abducted or whatever it may be. But worst comes to worst, they actually get brainwashed, and there's not something that you want. So it's very important that Islamically, once again, get yourself attached to the masjid. And if your son is getting older, in the hadith it says, in Islam it says, when he gets to a certain age, start taking him to the masjid and so on. So once you start getting his time occupied with Islamic related salah and Quran and so on, then that desire to be on the phone will just get less and less and less. And that doesn't only go for the phone, but also with TV games. Today, TV games are all connected to the internet. People are talking to each other and so on. So don't think that he's just sitting there playing TV games. He's talking to 100 other people, of which you just have to have one person who brainwashes him, and that's it.
We've got 2 minutes to wrap up. There was so much more that I wanted to talk to you about, the issue around halal and haram, the issue about fitna, the issue about breakdown in family relationships because of jealousy. Yes. But inshallah, we'll talk about it next time. Inshallah. But in closing, can you summarize what we've talked about and a very important take-home message for all our viewers?
Sure. There is the dunya. Definitely, Allah Ta'ala says that for the Muslims, the dunya is a jail. For the non-believer, the dunya is paradise. So we're not saying don't live in a dunya. We're saying live in a dunya, but attach yourself to your deen. Make sure that your kids finish their education in Islam in order to make them better people so that they can manage their lives, themselves, their businesses, etc. in a more Islamic manner. Inshallah, that will definitely bring them success.
And if you have a sound home environment, inshallah, then your business, whether it's a one-man operation or a 20-man operation, all of those ethical values, Islamic values like trust, like 100%. You said, akhlaq, respect, dignity, ethics, etc., if that is well in place in a Muslim home,
Yes.
you'll take it wherever you go to.
Definitely.
In the business, in your workplace, in your travels, in your interactions with every human being you come into contact
That's
with.
correct, yes.
Maulana, shukran for being with
Shukran.
us. Remember us in your du'as.
Assalamu
Till the
alaikum.
next time. Wassalam. And there you have it, Maulana Ashraf Patel talking to us about Islamic guidance in your business, but I say right from the cradle, inshallah, to your grave. If you've got the right Islamic foundation, then alhamdulillah, you'll be an absolute pleasure to everybody who comes in contact with you throughout your life. On that note then, time for us to wrap up. Thank you for being with us. To the production team, thank you for the support. Take care on the roads. As always, it is Khuda Hafiz from me, Julie Alli.